He took every penny he had at 17.
I was off school and, learned the commission game, ended up running a store, ended up running 2 stores, and then ultimately kind of took everything that I had and started my own cell phone store. We learned how to hustle in different ways.
Turned it into an empire and could have retired by 32.
So that's kind of my holding company and my parent company. And then inside of that, obviously, we have a bunch of different funds and things like that as we open restaurants or buy pieces of real estate and all of that.
40 plus commercial properties, a dozen venture investments, and the franchise rights to one of the fastest growing health brands in North America right now.
Franchising is a very, very complicated business because you not only do you have to be really, really successful, you have to be really, really successful and pay your franchisor a good amount of fees.
While Wall Street chases tickers, he built a debt-free model that puts the returns back in the hands of the operators and investors.
The next big thing here that we'll be doing is really kind of one fund of funds type of option where, rather than doing one-off deals into certain things.
Now he sits down with me, Jay Aldebert, the guy who has analyzed 89,000 businesses and growing, who's recovered over $2 billion in owner's profitability, for a conversation about what it really takes to build wealth outside the system. He is Justin Sloan, and I am the Chief of Growth.
Chief of Growth, 88,000 deep, took the old return to owner, that's the only truth.
Where are we guys going? Where you get started? Where do you live? First of all,
I split my time. I'm born and raised in Iowa,
Gotcha.
In Cedar Rapids. So that's where my home's at. And I've, got a nice property, land here and everything like that. But I have a bunch of restaurants and business in Texas, specifically Dallas. I own the rights to a business for the whole state of Texas. So I also have franchisees under me and stuff. And so I'm on the road. I joke that I live in Marriott's.
Yeah.
But, just let's play that game and just keep on growing a little bit. What about you?
So I'm in Arlington Heights, Illinois now. I'm from Toronto, Ontario is where I'm from, a suburb of there. We have a company in either country. Maybe 23 years ago, they decided to move me over. So I decided to come to your country and see what I could do.
What it's all about. So where is Arlington Heights in Illinois?
It is north of the city. Schaumburg is probably the biggest center closest. They always kind of see people recognize that for some reason. Are you familiar with?
Yeah. Yep.
That's just down the road.
I might be in Chicago in like 3 weeks. I think I'm going to go see Ye.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the reviews of the concerts just look unbelievable. Just the guy gets on the top of a dome for 2.5 hours and spits 20 years worth of hits. You just never know when that's going to come back around. He sold out Soldier Field 2 nights in a row. So
that's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah. I wouldn't have guessed that. I went to a concert of my youth the other night. I went to Saturday night. I went to the Foo Fighters.
Okay, nice.
He seems more energetic now than he did in terms of like what I recall, from the early 2000s. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I saw Garth Brooks a few weeks ago, and then I just like concerts.
How's he kicking it?
Pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it was fun. Well, it was in Wisconsin. They have like this summer fest thing where it's like two concerts every night all over. And the weather was not great. I was there with a pretty big group and outdoor venue, and it actually started raining while he was singing Thunder Rolls and Lightning Strikes. So that was kind of one of those fun experiences,
Gotcha. So Iowa, you're growing up there. How long before you decide? You still live there, right?
Yeah, I still have a house here. Yep.
So
I like my simple life. I do. I like like I said, I got 3.5 acres, good size home. Everything's 15 minutes away, and it's only a 90-minute flight to Dallas. So, I can wake up at 5 a.m., be on the flight by 6:30 or 7, in a meeting there by 9 o'clock. And,
nice.
It's not bad at all.
What's the closest airport to you?
Eastern Iowa Airport. It's literally like 20 minutes away.
And they have a flight to Dallas?
Oh, all over. Yeah. Chicago, Phoenix, Minneapolis, Chicago, all over. Yeah. I mean, it's the second largest airport in the state.
Gotcha. The only reason I asked that, we have like 800 employees that, and I used to for about a decade. Like you're somewhere new every 2 days, not predictably, just you're there, sort of thing. So I kind of map out what airports are good, I know every airport code kind of thing. It just it's
Yep.
ridiculous. You caught my interest on things right off the hop when you were explaining, obviously, what you do now. You said, you own some restaurants. So let's talk about the restaurants. I'm a chef. It's going to catch my attention right away, even though we're probably starting at the end, and we'll cycle back to the beginning. But
That's all right.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so I'll give a little of my background and kind of how I got into restaurants.
Cool. Yeah.
But it's a franchise, right? So I'm not the chef, I'm the operator, and that kind of goes back to my history. So right out of high school, I built a chain of cell phone stores. I was working at a local mall, selling phones, going there every night after I was off school, and learned the commission game, ended up running a store, ended up running 2 stores, and then ultimately kind of took everything that I had and started my own cell phone store, and then duplicated it and duplicated it again.
Can I pause you there? How do you start your own cell phone store? Like, do you go to is it an AT&T at that point or something like that?
It was an affiliate of T-Mobile. Actually, the company was called Iowa Wireless. So the way that it worked was they handled all of the territory in Iowa, and worked with local landline companies, because landline companies needed ways to make new revenue. So they would build towers in their cities, and and then we had a national agreement with T-Mobile. So when people roamed to other states, because T-Mobile was growing so fast, they really didn't want to spend the money building in Iowa where there's just very limited population. Why not go build in major major areas all over the place? So we handled Iowa and they handled the rest of the country. And it was a really great partnership, 20-some year partnership. They ended up actually buying out the company at the end of it. But yeah, so I worked for Iowa Wireless and then ultimately went to them and decided to become an authorized dealer of them, and create stores that always sold was that product. So we're exclusive Iowa Wireless dealers. And I made my stores even look like they're corporate, but then, added in a few new things, sold some more accessories, did some repairs, all that, like things that they weren't doing at that time at the corporate level, and literally just started selling phones and found some great real estate, did, the cheapest build out you could, but, while still making it pretty nice. And like I said, I was the only employee for 4.5 months until I could finally hire someone and, really create a business out of it. But I scaled that business over about 14 years and, really learned the idea of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's where I think, like I said, I'm not a chef. And so a lot of chefs have to create one concept and then another concept and another. And that's where, I have so much respect for people that can do that because it's so incredibly difficult. I'm really good at doing the same thing over and over and over again. And so I ended up, as I exited the cell phone world, kind of fell in love and got bit by the real estate bug. So I started buying, single family homes, and they were all 3-bed, 1-bath slab homes, 1 or 2 stall garages, again, doing the same thing all day, every day. Same paint color, same carpet, same cabinets, same everything. And then eventually learned about commercial real estate. I was a tenant in a lot of properties and had the opportunity to buy a strip mall that actually one of my cell phone stores was located in. And, once you learn about triple net, not getting those, phone calls for leaky toilets and stuff, that's obviously kind of where my path has gone since then. And I still hold and buy a lot of real estate. And that's a big part of the restaurant industry too. What kind of lease that you sign, what are your build out costs? What are your traffic counts? What's the property? How many parking spots do you have? All of that kind of stuff matters a lot to the success of, any kind of business, and especially restaurants.
I want to go back just because obviously that was a lot of the onion unpeeled, and I kind of want to classify each section there. So you were in high school, you were finished high school when you get into the cell phone, or do we go to college or do we just become an entrepreneur right off the hop? What's happening there?
Yeah. So I was in high school as a senior, going into my senior year in high school. It was July before my senior year. And that's when I started. And then my senior year, I kind of had a pretty easy senior year where I was done most days, kind of noon or 1 o'clock, and would literally go to the mall at 1 and work until 9 o'clock, 4, 5, 6 days a week. And, the commission back then was really, really juicy. And, I'm a senior in high school. I have 2 cars, a motorcycle, I'm making every financial mistake you can possibly make in your entire life. But, luckily you're young enough. Who cares?
Lighting cigars with $100 bills kind of thing at the same time.
It wasn't quite that bad, but I had like a 600 square foot apartment with Italian leather couches and a 55-inch huge box TV. So there's 3 feet of floor space. But it was fun. And I always joke, I'm really glad I made all of those mistakes at that age. And now, like we were talking about earlier, I love experiences now and concerts and traveling and this, and the stuff doesn't, at some point just kind of wears off a little bit. But no, so I did go to college for a short period. I joke that I've dropped out of college twice. Once wasn't enough for me. You got to make every decision at least twice.
Right. You do the same thing over and over again, as you stated.
Yeah. So there you go, including that. Maybe I should try a third time.
Right.
No, but the first time, I went thinking I, loved computers, and I was kind of a little bit of a techie nerd, obviously in the cell phone world, and thought, hey, I want to repair computers and get involved in this world and everything. But then, you start realizing hey, I'm going to be sitting in an office and fixing broken printers or this or whatever. And I'm so used to dealing with people and sales and all that. I knew by the end of the first semester, this was not the path that I wanted to do. And I was also being offered, a role to take over one of the large, stores that was corporate at that time. And, they were going to give me a lot of manager training and this and send me, through a lot of that kind of path, and kind of decided to do that instead. And then many years down the road, after I think at that point, I had probably had 3 cell phone stores that I owned myself. I kind of decided, hey, now at this point, I'm starting to make every mistake as a business owner. They don't teach you marketing. They don't teach you taxes. They don't teach you, formation of LLCs or this or any of that kind of stuff. So I started to go back and take some classes of hopes of kind of taking entrepreneurial type of stuff and going down that path. But ultimately, and I still feel this way quite strongly, you got to take art appreciation and, basic chemistry, really, a lot of prerequisites before they'd remotely let you get into the meat. And it just, when you're running a business that is taking 60, 70 hours a week and choosing to take a few extra hours towards something else, I couldn't do it, So ultimately dropped out again, and continued focusing on scaling the businesses. And my rule was just, let's make enough money that whatever mistakes that we make, you can learn from, and we'll call that your tuition.
Gotcha. Tuition. I like that. So tell me, I always like to know a little bit more about the origin story, right? You're in high school, obviously you're selling cell phones. Your parents at some point kind of, see this, or mom and dad around at this time, or what's their impression of all of a sudden their son's making good coin, and do they push towards school, a little bit, or are they kind of saying
yeah. So I was raised by a single mom, 2 brothers. So from a really young age, 15, 16 years old, we had to figure out ways to make our own money if we wanted to have anything extra in life. Gotcha. If we wanted to go shopping for new school clothes or something, that just wasn't in the budget, and so we learned how to hustle in different ways to make some dollars. And, I learned commission. I actually worked at Radio Shack for a Christmas, and I'd work with a bunch of guys that were selling little $2 diodes and triodes and, record player needles. And, we're getting 3-4% commission off whatever we sell. So they'd spend 2 hours with somebody and make 8 cents. Meanwhile, I'm over here being like, have you heard of DVD players? Let me tell you about these Sprint cell phones, right? I'm going to sell things that are hundreds of dollars, because we got to eat. Well, I was just going to say, so, ultimately, was my mom a fan of the fact that I did not go to college? No. And my distant relatives much more upset, because they're very much the, more proper, let's go to school, follow the proper path, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think my mom really understood what level that things were at until she actually, like I said, I was just turning 18. I was a senior in high school. And, she was a hustler. She'd work 5, 6, 7 different jobs, up early in the morning, delivering papers, selling Avon, going and waiting tables, doing everything that she could. She taught me how to work really, really hard, but not really, really smart. And where I think things clicked a little bit more for her, and she was definitely not happy about this, is when she found out she couldn't claim me on her taxes the final year because I actually made more money than she did. And that's not that fun for someone that's, paycheck to paycheck and was counting on that tax write-off. But at the same point, I think that she probably had an appreciation to realize, holy cow, like there is a reason he's working so much. There's things that he's doing. The day I graduated high school was, on a Saturday, and Sunday I moved into my first apartment and, kind of decided to take my own path. And knowing that I was young enough that, even if things fall on their face or whatever, hey, like, you've got all this time in the world. I think too much pressure is put on kids right out of high school to, have to make all of these decisions for the next 60 or 70 years.
Right.
Meanwhile, I mean, think about how many businesses and how many careers people started 10, 20 years ago that aren't remotely in, options, for viable, ways to pay for your life right now.
But even
and with AI changing everything so fast. Right, exactly. So
the education side too, as well. Brothers and sisters, you said you had 2 brothers, no sisters. I'm a big believer in psychology, and obviously the development of an individual is based on the household they're raised in, and specifically siblings. What number are you? 1, 2, or 3?
I'm the middle guy.
The middle guy. And what's the gap in terms of age groups?
My older brother's a few years older than me. My younger brother, another like 5, 6 years younger than me.
So pretty good gap on either side.
Yeah. I mean, was in high school at the same time as my older brother, but he was kind of exiting as I was entering, but he was very much the, follow the rules, go the right path, has had an extremely successful career in the, computing design world and things. My little brother is, he serves for our country. He's actually getting ready to retire from the military here early next year. And he's G.I. Joe.
Gotcha. We were both raised by single mothers. My father kind of exited early, the relationship, we'll just say, but then passed before I met him. Was Dad around overall?
Still never met him.
Never met him? So
Still never met him.
There's we're lining up here. Single mother. I've never met my biological father. And if it's okay, if you're not comfortable, I've been very open about this. Not ever meeting your father, is there a void there that in some way you kind of question or want to fill, or you push that off and said, if you don't want to be in my life, I don't want to be in yours?
Yeah, full disclosure, it's his loss because I'm awesome. You know what I mean? Like, and my brothers are awesome. And, my older brother actually found him many years ago and, was like, hey, do you want to go meet him and this? And I was like, no. I'm a big believer in my life that you don't do things that have minimal upside, but a lot of downside. And that's kind of one of those situations that I looked at, like, does not have a lot of upside. And, if he wanted to, he probably would have reached out, or if there, it would have happened at some point, especially during your childhood or as you're, graduating or this. There are those opportunities that make sense regardless of the stories or the history or whatever. There's plenty of chances that a grown man can raise their hand and say, hey, let's grab a coffee. I'd just like to chat. Right. And so I kind of made the decision that, and I still very strongly feel this way. And based upon my older brother's meeting with him, I think I was probably right. But, life is interesting, right? You're dealt a hand of cards, but it's how you look at them and how you play them. And I've never looked at, oh, poor me, because I was growing. Like, I would so much rather grow up in the situation that I have and have the experience that I had at young age and understanding things, rather than kind of had people shield me from what, real life is actually like. And I got the real life experience by actually living it, and was never told, and had to go through all of those experiences myself.
There was, so mine happened at a very early age, sort of thing. He passed away when I was 19. And in that time, there was only one aspect that I, kind of felt short-armed, and I was short, is that at that time, there was almost like a little bit of a desire where it kind of said, hey, look what I became, since you walked away at birth, and now I'm 18, 19, I've become whatever. And obviously I hadn't established anything at that point. Athletics is the only thing I'd done well at that point. But I kind of, there was that desire, which obviously it went away over a period of time, but I still did have that kind of same mentality as you. Like, why didn't you make any decisions he did not make any decisions to be in my life up until that point. So do I really want to be in his? But then there was that, you kind of want to show them what you became, what you missed out on, maybe. Any feeling similar in that?
Well, I think every entrepreneur and successful person in any way, shape, or form has some chip on their shoulder somewhere. And I definitely have that, right? I mean, when you grow up and you're wearing, hand-me-down clothes from your older brother and getting made of, fun of in school, then, it's really fun to then be invited back to your school to help teach in their business classes, right? And ultimately, that's the way to win. And, slow and steady does win the race, and keeping your head down and doing the right things, does work. And I definitely have that chip on my shoulder. There's no question about it. And still to this day, right? You get dismissed by somebody, you're not taking this or whatever, and all of a sudden it makes you want to win and work that much harder to go just continue to get to whatever next level it is. Or, let's say, I have a lot of investors, so I take winning for them extremely seriously. But when I was raising capital for my first time, you hear a lot of no's. And those no's ultimately make me want to go win for everybody that it did say yes that much more. And so sometimes those chips on your shoulders are very beneficial as well.
The chip on your shoulder, one of the things that, just to give you a quick background, I go through 3,500 companies a year, right? I look at 3,500 companies in the revenue band of, let's say, 2 million to 100 million privately held companies. And my responsibility is to do a diagnostic of the business and have very specific recommendations that will ultimately hit a predetermined profit by design. Sort of thing. That's what we do. That's all well and great if they're a robot. I can just reprogram them overall. But a large portion of what I do is the psychological side, is really knowing what makes that individual tick. I like to call it, Carl Jung, if you've studied any aspect of that, he looks at the shadow driver story, right? I've kind of adapted that shadow driver story, that there's usually a significant, specifically with entrepreneurs, there is a significant emotional event that occurs. And in that significant emotional event, it creates two separate impetus. One is fear, one is greed, right? The fear is whatever hurt me overall, which they said I'd never become anything or something along those lines. My biggest fear is they're ever going to be right. And my biggest greed is to prove them wrong. Do you have a specific story that you can latch onto right there? Or is it kind of a quilt where different things kind of just continued to add to it and build as you went on?
No, I mean, I think I don't think there's one specific thing that I can remember that was like that moment that I kind of decided this, but it was also like the personal desire. I think when I was growing up, I got little tastes of other ways that people live and things that you can do. My aunt and uncle are extremely successful. I would go visit them out in Philadelphia here and there. And you realize, hey, wait a minute, there's families that, have success in a good sized home and they're home for dinner at night. And, or I'd go over to a friend's home and realize, wow, this is just different. And so I think I just had this urge to see what was, what else was out there and not, be stuck in the exact same, boat that I was in forever. And I don't think it's one specific event. I think it's more just the desire to learn and grow and win. And, I do a little bit of consulting on the side just because I love to do it. And I love what you're saying about the emotional aspect of it. And we're talking restaurants earlier, and so many restaurants are owned by chefs that maybe have the best recipe for something, but they don't necessarily have the best business acumen. They don't understand cost of goods or labor or the real estate side. They don't understand the paperwork that they're signing, what that lease actually means. And so they can be the absolute best at one thing, but it's those other things that they need help with. And as I've grown my career and my opportunities, and again, I'm kind of a systems and duplication kind of a guy, it's so much fun to be able to help those individuals in those ways, learn those things, and ultimately make them better. And I love a world where, just for the same reason as doing this podcast, meet some new people, have some new conversations, share some like stories, create relationships. And I hope from here we're friends and we know each other for 20 years more, because we'll continue to cross paths and this and everything. And so if you, in general, you just do the right thing. And that's how I've always done it. When it comes to every business I built, just try and do the right thing, try and win as much as you can while also not stomping on the throats of others to get there. And then when you find people around you where you can provide value to, why not? Again, there's no downside and there's a lot of upside. Those are the things I love to do and spend my time and effort on.
I like that colloquialism that you're using, this is how I make decisions. I kind of weigh out all those aspects. Do you take risk in general? I mean, each acquisition, I'm assuming, and each partnership is always a risk. I get that. But is there a specific set of rules that you have when you weigh out, obviously, what's the next venture?
Yeah, very calculated risk, I would say. And I'm an investor in about 20 companies, probably closer to 15. Several of them have gone out. Some of them have done really, really well. That's the name of the game, right? But when I love the analogy that Warren Buffett's used, where I'm playing a game where I stand out the plate and I get to see unlimited pitches, and I can wait for those ones to be in my sweet spot before I have to take a swing. There's no strikes called. And so I love to just you get to see 35. I would do that for fun. I would literally just 10 companies a day. I get to go just see their numbers and learn what they're doing and read their business plans and talk with the people. That literally sounds like fun to me.
It's addictive.
I know some people like to play fantasy football. I like to play fantasy business.
Right.
Where essentially I can draft the right teams that I want. I can, and so with that, right, you sometimes draft the wrong players, you sometimes make the wrong decisions, but then you learn from it and do better in the long run. So I'm actually an old poker player. There was a period in my life where in the summers I'd go live in a house full of poker pros. And, we play the World Series events and then online poker. We literally have, I think, 60 different, monitors in one room where we all have 3 or 4 screens playing 8, 10 tables at a time. And you learn bet sizing, right? And you learn bankroll management. And if I have $10,000, I don't want to bet $10,000 to play one tournament when maybe I could play $100 tournaments that I have a better edge in. Or when I'm walking around a casino and I'm picking which table I want to play poker at, I can look around and make assumptions of who I'm playing against, what size that they're playing at compared to what my comfortability is. Then from there, gauge what level of advantage that I believe that I have. And all of a sudden you start stacking reasons that say, okay, now this is the right bet that I want to make. And I know a lot of previous poker people that have done really, really well in business using similar mentalities.
Right.
So if I'm going to invest in a company, well, if I only have a $200,000 net worth, I probably should invest $100,000 in one company. Right. But it doesn't mean I couldn't invest 10 or 15 or 20 grand. And then while I'm investing, I also want to learn. Right. I want to read those updates. I want to be on those calls. I want to, all that. I want to research all their competition throughout it, see how they do, what they win with, what they don't, and ultimately know that I'm going to make a lot more of those bets in the future. So let's learn while also putting, some risk. And then when that one, perfect strike comes across the plate where you're like, oh, I know this. And that, to me, that was Everbowl, the acai bowl chain that I now own 10 locations of and the rights to 2 states. When that came across, I said, wait a minute. I know repeatable business. I know real estate. I might not know restaurants, but I don't necessarily have to know restaurants because I'm not the one creating the recipe. It's a proven supply chain. We know the approximate COGS numbers. I know how to run labor. I know how to sign good leases. And I'd flipped a lot of homes and owned a lot of strip malls. So I know how to build out locations for less price. So I can be into the stores probably less than most people can and run them better than most people can. At that point, Drew Brees was coming into the company. He was helping open 150 locations across 13 states. Jason Tatum owns the rights to Boston. So there's lots of other players in this field. It's like, if I can play my role and play it well, this is where we want to make the bigger swings.
Now, did you, so to digress a little bit, is the cell phone, is that a sale event on the exit, or how are we exiting in that particular case? And
so a little bit of everything. So at that point, kind of about 3 years before I really exited, the writing was on the wall that this smaller carrier was not going to be able to compete with the big guys.
Right. I was
not going to get some premium great exit. We closed a couple stores. I did sell a couple stores that then maybe they converted into something else or could use, some of the things in there. And then on one of the strip malls, I actually owned the strip mall itself. So I gave the store to corporate because they still wanted to keep it. But I, in return, upped the rent and put a new 5-year lease in place. Nice. Right. So I actually added a couple $100,000 in value to the building by having a now corporate guaranteed 5-year lease in place instead of a short-term, smaller independent owner lease in place. So navigated everything, really interesting. But at the end of the day, there was not a great business. And I was fortunate that, if you rewind those last 3 years, again, the writing was really on the wall. But even a couple years before that, kind of started seeing the cracks in the foundation and made the decision that I was not going to continue to open more stores. I think that's an important thing for people to do, right? When, if you want to keep going down a certain path, sometimes in business, there's kind of be things that are screaming red flags that say, slow down. You've got something good that's working right now, and it might actually be a good time to start looking at other things. And that's actually where I learned about real estate. I was just having some conversations with people, and a guy I know directly looked at me and he goes, every rich person I know owns real estate. And I ended up literally getting in the phone book and going on Google and searching for every property manager. I didn't even know there was such a thing as property managers. I thought, hey, I'm running this business. I don't have time to be a landlord in this and whatever. It's like, no, hire a property manager. Wait a second, And so all of a sudden I'm meeting with property managers, and one of them says, I actually have an investor that's going to be selling. They're moving out of the state, and they're selling 2 fourplexes. They're about a block away from each other. They're both fully leased. I already manage them. And, take a look at this. Here's how it performs right now. Here's the last couple years of numbers. And, if you can go in and repair the units and update some of this stuff, I think we can raise some rents here and there. And I said, okay, let's do it. So my first entrance into real estate was actually buying 2 apartment buildings. But again, already managed, had a couple years worth of numbers in a city that, my own city. So I could drive 15 minutes to go see them if I wanted to. And that was my, again, let's make the investment, but also learn along the way, make those mistakes, figure it out, and not have to learn the property management side at the same time as the investment side.
So you get into the real estate side, and how does that, so 14 years, we'll say, in the cellular, we get into real estate. I'm assuming that's been off and on as your career progresses, or was that just a season and that was it?
I don't think I'll ever get out of real estate. I do think real estate is a little less interesting right now than 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
When interest rates were quite a bit less, and now the arbitrage is not quite as juicy. I also fully believe, and this is a complete side conversation, I'm happy to go down this path, but I fully believe we're going to see a lot of opportunities, and we're already starting our R2 as commercial. Most people that do commercial loans do 5-year ARMs. So 5 years ago, they did a loan for 2.5% or 3%. Now they're having to refinance it at 6 or 6.5%. And those same deals aren't penciling. Banks are coming and doing reappraisals and saying, wait a second, that property's not worth near as much unless your NOI has absolutely gone through the roof on it. There's no such thing as 4 and 5 caps anymore unless you're in really, really select markets that still have a lot of upside and no new inventory coming on the line. But why in the world would you buy something at a 4 cap when interest rates are 6.5? Okay, if you can get interest rates at 2.5 and buy at a 4 cap, you can get a decent spread in there. But now these properties are 5 years older, more maintenance. Insurance is through the roof. Property taxes are going up like crazy. Maintenance and all that stuff is up through the roof. So even if you have raised rents, you probably have not raised your NOI as much as you thought you would, because you've had a lot of other expenses that you can't pass along to those tenants, especially in the apartment world. And so, I'm seeing and I'm talking to a lot of people, and I'm hearing of a lot of syndicators that are having to give their properties back to the banks. And ultimately, those deals will be there for someone else to get a whole new cost basis on. And I'm seeing properties listed at cap rates I haven't seen in several years, because as more inventory comes on the market and people have to sell them because they're not penciling in the way they were before, we're starting to see better deals in real estate. And I actually sold a good chunk of my real estate at the peak a few years ago, and am very much looking at ways to put that capital back to work in there. And I know my investors are, I'm getting a lot of emails asking, when are you going to start buying stuff again and things. But I like to, again, I've got my sweet spots, and going and buying things for way overpriced just because interest rates are low is something that I wouldn't do. And I watched a lot of people do it. And I watched a lot of people raise a lot of money and go buy these massive buildings and all this kind of stuff. But they did it because interest rates were cheap, not necessarily because the properties were actually worth that.
I have a question based on obviously current events, current affairs, and I'm not talking anything political or obviously what the market is. Obviously, let's say we'll call him a guru in this specific area or this specific space is under a lot of fire right now. Are you familiar with what's going on with Grant Cardone?
Sure.
And what he's being, well, not accused of, what he's being examined on right now, and deliberating over, obviously. What's your perception on that? Do you care to comment on that, or is it something you'd want to stay away from?
Yeah, I definitely have no problem being, political or controversial in anything whatsoever. Good. That's just the way I am. But no, I think Cardone's a very interesting character. I have met him before. And I do know people that are invested with him that have not been super happy with some of their returns. And ultimately, I think that's a good example of you can raise a ton of dollars and things work when interest rates are somewhere, but when they're resetting, they don't work quite as much. And ultimately, those investors are paying the price. And now those investors are starting, I'm guessing this is what you're talking about, those investors are starting to come forward and say, hey, we were kind of told these were what our returns would be, and we're not getting them. And, I've seen some of the testimony and some of the things he's going through right now where he's having to say, well, I said it could be up to this amount. I said it could be up to this amount. Right. And, I think it's really hard, raising money on that scale, and you're running ads all over the place and you're like literally advertising to go raise funds. You're really selling something. Right. And what I've always kind of chosen to do for my investments is really just tell people my thesis and allow them to put their money alongside of mine if they think that thesis makes sense. So when I first started buying real estate, I was buying a lot of small apartment buildings, single family homes. Then I started getting into commercial properties, and I had a really good friend that was like, hey, can I get a piece of this one? And literally for 2 years said no. And finally, he's bugging me again. And I said, actually, this deal came across. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be the majority owner. I'll let you be a smaller percentage of it. And I'll just, every month or every quarter, I'll just write you a little summary of what's going on with it. And then as, maybe a tenant would leave or, we'd have to make some investment into, I just communicate my thesis and my thought process of what makes sense to invest into and why and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, that deal did very well. And then he's part of another one, and all of a sudden other introductions. And and the best way to get more investors is to win for your current investment.
Right.
And, we went through a very long period of winning. And, again, as an investor in 20 companies, I have some that haven't updated me in 2 years, and I think that's a terrible way to do business. And so I think it's really important that you don't sell people on a return because, again, he didn't know interest rates were going to double. How many real estate agents have you heard saying date the rate for the last 5 years? Well, I mean, at this point, you're married, you got a couple kids, and, things are kind of messy, so I think it's really hard to tell people this is what the return, this is, but instead saying, here's my thesis, here's my projections of the ranges, and then also like I put my money into every deal. When we invest in companies together, I'm investing in that company. I'm simply saying, I think this is a good deal. I see 100 of these a year, and this is the one or two that I'm picking this year. If you want to put a little in alongside of me, here we go. And then with that, keep them updated, let them know what the thesis is working, when it's not. Sometimes you might have to pull the ripcord and try and get out of it a little bit earlier, or this or whatever it is. Nobody bats 1,000, but when you make really big promises and then are out buying jets and flashy life and this and that and whatever, I really think that doesn't look very good to the investors either.
Yeah, that perception is very clear. The investment side for you, is there a minimum that makes it interesting for you? In other words, these 20 companies, do you own the majority of them? Do you own 25% of them? What keeps you interested in that investment? Because obviously, if you're going to bring on more investors about the decisions you're making, that's going to dilute the number of shares and so on and so forth, right?
Well, yeah, not necessarily. I mean, a lot of these founders I know, or I'm really big into networking and business networking, and every, couple months I even throw big networking events. We have another one next month. It's at a private hangar. Get 100 friends, 100 people together there and stuff, and just create interesting conversations. And so sometimes these companies are just raising funds for their next round, going from Series A to Series B,
Right.
or whatever it might be. And so maybe they only have $2 million available. Well, I'll put in 100, and maybe collectively a group of my investors will put in another 250 or something. So we'll take up 15 or 20% of their round, and then they'll fill the rest of the round. And I don't think that dilutes it or anything. It more gives the people that I know access to the same things that I'm putting my dollars into. And I love helping companies that are just going to that next level. I don't deal too much with startups and helping them kind of figure out things from scratch. But once you've figured it out and you're getting ready to scale to that next level, that's where I love to come in and bring in people that can just be the funding that you need to continue doing what you're already doing and doing really well. So I don't think there's no specific percentage I'm looking at owning. I'm definitely, I'm along for the ride with these. I'm not asking for, board seats and controlling interest or any percentages or anything along the lines of that. But again, that's because these companies are of size enough where they already have a track record that they're raising dollars at an amount that we couldn't, we wouldn't take a huge chunk of it anyways.
The restaurant side, why choose specifically the Asia Bowl side? What got you into that? I'm assuming a networking event, somebody brought it to you at that particular time, or was there an interest in getting into the restaurant industry?
Yeah, I actually invested into the company first. I met the founder at an event in the middle of COVID, and he had 20 some corporate stores and was just getting ready to start franchising, and said, hey, here's what we're doing. Drew Brees at this time was coming in. So I was putting my, my money alongside a Hall of Fame, he just got inducted to the Hall of Fame a couple of days ago. So a soon to be Hall of Fame quarterback who has a very proven track record for the franchise world. He's one of the first Jimmy John's franchisees and part of a lot of other brands. And ultimately, kind of made an investment in the company itself. But then I flew out to San Diego. And as they'll tell the story, I wouldn't leave their stores for a few days. I was just sitting kind of in the corner with my laptop and watching this interaction. And the brand is essentially Chipotle, but fruit. You go through a conveyor belt style line and you can put in there the fruits and the toppings and acai or mango or vanilla or pitaya, all these kind of things, and smoothies and, all these kind of simple items, small square footage. But coming from the cell phone world, every customer that walked into my cell phone stores was usually unhappy, right? Their kid dropped the phone in the toilet. They went way over their minutes or data. The charger port broke on the phone. They were going to, there was always a number of different issues that it was our job. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting in this world where every customer was coming in smiling and happy and leaving even more smiling and more happy. And so that's where I ultimately kind of decided to make that bigger swing of saying, hey, I know repeatable businesses. I spent a lot of time learning the business, the numbers, the metrics, et cetera. I know real estate, how to find good real estate, sign good leases, et cetera. And then I funded the first restaurant fully myself. No investors, nobody outside. I kind of, again, taking my thesis and I'm going to put my dollars to work first. And ultimately that started proving itself out. So I went to a small group and we opened the next couple, and then, put a post on Facebook and said, hey, I've kind of been up to something. If you might be interested, $25K minimum. And I'm throwing an event on this night, and 100 people showed up and we funded $1 million in one night.
When you look at franchises, do you put a lot of I guess, credence in the, what we call the rollout kit? Do you go through the whole financial, control structure along with how do you actually prepare the product and look at and give a strength to that rollout kit? Or do you believe in the product first?
I think it's a mix of both. I think franchising is a very, very complicated business because you not only do you have to be really, really successful, you have to be really, really successful and pay your franchisor a good amount of fees. If you're a Firehouse Subs franchisee, you're paying 6%, in royalties and 5% in marketing and maybe a technology fee and this and some other things inside of there. So even if you're running a good business, you have to run a great business, and the franchisor also has to provide that much more value to you to offset getting those fees. And so, the unit level economics of it is huge. And the franchise world is also a very dirty industry, because and if you look at as many companies as you do, I can't imagine how many people that you see that maybe signed on for a bad franchise. And a lot of people, they own one or two ice cream shops and say, I want to franchise this. And they tell everybody, buy into my business and do this. But they've only got the numbers for 2 locations in their hometown where maybe they happen to know everybody, or their wife is knows everybody in town, so they're all coming to visit her at that coffee shop every single day. But when you go duplicate that in cities where nobody knows who you are, nobody knows the brand, nobody knows the story, that's when you really start to get told the true story of whether that brand is actually successful or not.
And moreover, you were the original entrepreneur. You're the one that really had a passion for this industry in the first place, even if it is an ice cream shop, right? They had a passion for that industry. They're going to work harder. They're going to work longer. They're going to put in the hours. They're going to cut costs. They're going to, all those. I'm not saying this is a blanket statement. I find that the people that come in and get involved in a franchise, they're not 100% at the same level of passion right away. Maybe it develops, but not having that same passion, not willing to put in those same hours. How can we guarantee or assure that they're going to actually turn out the same results? And that's what we walk into a lot of time is whatever franchise was built, they've done a very good job on the operational side. This is how you make the product. This is how, the store opens each day. And but then having that together with a complete financial model that actually produces a profit. People make fun of McDonald's, but their franchise, the thing I love about it most is they've got it down to 20 minutes. 20 minutes in terms of revenue, what's going to happen next as it relates. And I've done a few different studies on them. And to be able to look at it, I'm not saying that it comes down to make sure that management structure, but people say, well, we're not McDonald's, we're this type of franchise. It's a different sector, but it's no different. It's the ability to proactively measure and manage, obviously, these financial indicators and be able to make decisions quickly, not wait for lagging indicators to come a month later or a week later. It doesn't really matter. And so that strength of what they build out is obviously which makes these the most valuable.
And that's why they have such a crazy high resale rate, and you can build a business that then you can exit and sell to the next people and sell to the next people. I know many people that have owned McDonald's and have multiple homes and retire very, very nicely. And but then there's another burger business. Then how many burger businesses do we know that have gone out of business?
Right.
McDonald's is also very, very difficult to get into as a franchisee. And I think that's an important piece too, is a lot of franchisors early on, they decide they want to start franchising. Well, the cost to become a franchisor is very expensive. You're talking about $1 million right out the gate. By the time that you get all your FDDs and legal paperwork and register in all the states that you want to do business in, and now you're hiring some training people because they need to develop these toolkits that you're going to be rolling out all over the place, and they need to sell some franchises. And they need to start getting in some royalties. And even when they sell a franchise, it's another 3 to 6 months before they find the location, another 3 to 6 or 9 months before they're actually open. And then all of a sudden, then they start getting their little bit of royalty structures. And so these franchisors are very tempted with, well, maybe they're not perfect. Maybe they're not super into our product or brand, but we need to expand and we need to grow and we need to sell locations. Well, then all of a sudden, the success of your first 10 or 15 franchisees will ultimately determine the success of your franchise brand as a whole.
And if you're doing a retraction at that point on 5 of them out of the 15, then obviously that has a big impact over as well.
Well, and then imagine now you start selling, when you're selling franchises early, the first thing people are doing is they're calling every owner and saying, tell me what it's like to be part of this business. What's the support like? What are your sales? What do you pay? Do you feel like you get value for what you pay? And if you've got a franchisor that didn't really set these people up for success, or maybe let in the wrong people into the system, or now all of a sudden there was one on one side of town and they're thinking about, and then this one closes, they're like, wait a minute, well, I made the right decision not getting into that industry, right? And so Oh man, I could go on and on about the franchise world because I do a decent amount of consulting in that world too. And the number one thing I'll say is do not franchise early. Prove it out, grow to 20, 30, 40 corporate locations, enter into some new markets where nobody knows who you are and prove your system out there, and then look for franchisees because you're getting people to invest sometimes their entire net worth and then some on this idea, and you don't want them to be the person figuring it out. The people should, when they're buying into a franchise, they're buying into a system that should be a relative level of proven, and they should not be the test dummy for these systems, for these learnings. Just because you believe in your brand and you want to see it in all 50 states, go show that you can bring it to a few other states, a few other markets, a few from scratches. Nail that grand opening process, nail the training process, nail the real estate selection process, and make those so good that ultimately, I mean, what you're seeing happen now is, the Dave's Hot Chickens of the world made that so juicy that they have a wait list. It's hard to become a franchisor or a franchisee. And that's what you want as a franchisor. You want to create a system that is so great that now you get to go be picky about who are your franchisees, and you can now hold them to higher standards and make them follow the systems that much more.
Have you sold any of the franchises you got involved in so far?
No, I still own them.
You still all invested?
Yep.
I got a question just from an interest sake. I have to know only because it's part of a solution, I guess, to a problem we have. I don't have the time to show history in my franchise. I'm going to become a franchisor. I don't have the time. What about the ability to take a certified valuation, them to look at my system itself and stamp it demonstrably achievable, let's just say? Do you put any value in that whatsoever, or do you feel that's just an opinion, even if it is from an accredited aspect? Have you seen that happen, first and foremost?
So I think right now, especially, businesses are not trading for the same valuations that they were a few years ago for the same reason that real estate's not, right? When SBA loans are 12% compared to 8%, or a home equity loan is 6.5 or 7 compared to 3, depending on how you're going to get capital for those businesses, you can't pay. And so that's one of the reasons we have not sold anything. So I just believe on firmly keep building businesses, like make them the best that they can, and then the right time to exit will eventually come along. Are you saying you're like legitimately going to franchise what you do right now?
No. I'm not saying that.
Hypothetically?
Yeah, no, just hypothetically. Like we see people that say, I don't have the years to wait, scale this, have these 10 locations, corporate locations and all that kind of stuff. Is there a possibility? And I have not put this in practice, but I just wondered if do you have an opinion on it? Have you had its experience where people are going through the certified valuation process pattern? It actually quantifies the value of the system itself, not that individual business, but the system itself, to essentially produce EBITDA, of course, and how strong it is. Have you seen that out there? Do you believe in that process? Do you think it has legs?
Yeah, I mean, Dave's Hot Chicken is a perfect example of their holding company is now buying brands with as little as 2 or 3 locations, that they're seeing these numbers and believe that they can plug those into their systems and, plug in the right marketing, plug in the right sales, plug in the right trainers and real estate and all of this, and take those brands, hopefully find the next Dave's Hot Chicken, right? And there's a lot of companies that are doing exactly that. What I would say for the owner operator that built those 2 restaurants and now all of a sudden they want to be the franchisor themselves, they just figured out how to run the repeatable concept. And now they're going to have to figure out how to be a franchisor. And they are very different skill sets, right? Like you said, maybe going and working 80 hours in your store and making friends and making the best whatever you do or the service or whatever, that is one skill set. But now you have to go learn the entire legal side of it, monitoring, managing, scaling, having those standards across places where you don't have ownership. And due to franchise laws, you can't step in and do certain things for them because there's employee, guidelines and things along the lines of that. So what I would say, and then the other part of it that I would say is, if you just don't have the time to go prove that out, well, how are you going to ask people to invest all of these dollars and all of this time and all of this effort when you're not willing to go do that yourself for a little bit more time? And you should never become a franchisor unless your plan is to do it for the next 10 or 15 years. Because
in that
by
capacity,
the time,
not both.
And exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And so, and maybe you're opening some corporate stores while franchising a couple. So do it a little slower, right? So, hey, I got 6 locations. I've had a few franchise inquiries, and we have somebody that would be a really great fit in this market. They're vetted. They've been in this industry before. They're just looking for their next concept. Hey, maybe let's let them open 1 or 2. And with that, I'll give them less royalties, maybe a cheaper franchise fee, all of this. And I'm still going to be opening a couple of my corporate stores too. And they realize that we're going to kind of figure this part out together, and we'll sweeten the deal for them a little bit so that we can scale and learn at the same time. And then from there, okay, maybe next year I want to open 6 franchises and 5 corporate stores, and I love when corporate owns businesses that are also the franchisee, because now they're in this, now you're all rowing the boat in the same direction. Right. They have the same problems you have. They have the same headaches. They have the same ups and downs. You look at so many of these businesses that are purely franchised, and corporate really doesn't understand the same pain that the franchisees do as well. Whereas when they're running those stores and they're also running the franchise business, I feel like they make better franchisor decisions for the whole network. And that's definitely one of the pieces that I look at as well.
Sloan Capital, right? That is that, I got it right?
Yep.
That's the company you own?
Yeah. So that's kind of my holding company and my parent company. And then inside of that, obviously, we have a bunch of different funds and things like that as we open restaurants or, buy pieces of real estate and all of that. And I think the next big thing here that we'll be doing is really kind of one fund of funds type of option where, rather than doing one-off deals into certain things, we'll be able to, invest in a company, buy a building, grow over here or there or whatnot, all under one holding. And based on the size that we're getting and the number of investors that we have now, it just makes a lot more sense from operationally. I can tell you, we run 30 different LLCs that all have, a lot of different investors in this and, all own different parts of entities and this and everything else. And so the next phase of this is to, really start building a single fund that we can go deliver on, and then hopefully continue to scale from there and launch more funds in the future.
How old are you now, Justin, if you don't mind me asking?
I am 41 years old.
41. Any children, married?
2 kids. Yep.
Say again?
2 kids. Yep.
2 kids. Gotcha. How old? I won't go any further.
My
you don't have to tell me their names 15, or what schools they go to. But...
Yeah, no, my daughter is 15 and my son is 12. And so, that's why it's very important for me to still have some balance. I'm very real that, I only have a few years left with my daughter in my household and all of that. So, my last trip to Dallas, she actually came with me. She had a friend that moved down there she hadn't seen in a long time. And so, she's going with her friend for a few days. Well, we have, I have some business stuff. And the last night, her and I are going out to dinner. And then we went to, do one of those virtual reality things where we're shooting some aliens and stuff like that. And, so I've always really believed in, showing my kids what business is really like. And I don't want to keep them separated. So I'll go on property tours and my kids will come with me. They secret shopped a frozen yogurt shop not too long ago.
I love
and it. Walk it, we go in there and I get them a little bit of frozen yogurt. The agent's still sitting outside. We come back outside. My daughter looks right at the agent. She goes, well, I can tell you why they're going to go out of business. It's dirty in there. 2 of the machines don't work. The person was in the back. And I wouldn't go back here again, And
That's
it's like,
awesome.
when you can have a 15-year-old, at that point, she wasn't even 15, looking through those lenses, hey, I'm doing something okay.
She comes to you 4 years from now and says, I want to be part of Sloan Capital. I'm not going to go on to school. Which way are we pushing her?
What kind of value are you going to bring to my company?
I like it.
I mean, there's no free rides. There's no free lunches. I didn't get a free ride. I didn't get a free lunch, and I wouldn't go to somebody else and say, what role are you going to give me without me being able to provide value back? I would say, hey, you want to take over some of my restaurants? I would love for you to go work in a few other restaurants, learn some different things that then you can bring back to this company. And along the way, I'll start teaching you some of the basics around these kind of things or whatnot. But I don't think anyone would have respect for any of them if I just put them in charge of something right out of the gate with no experience or anything along the lines of that. So I don't think either one of my kids directly need to go to school, directly need to go to college, directly need to go down. I mean, they're each going to have their own paths. But if they want to work with me and this company and what I'm building, then they need to be able to provide value to myself, to our investors, and how many people do we know that they get a nice paycheck because of the last name that they have, right, but ultimately they're not making the company that they're part of that much better, and that will definitely never happen in my household.
I like it. So what's next? You said, I heard, obviously we want to do this full kind of roll up of where it's real estate, it's the franchise all put together. Is there anything that you feel you haven't done yet, or a direction that you thought, you know what, I'd really like to get into this? Because you've dabbled in so many. What's next for you?
No, I mean, again, I think that doing a single fund where we can invest into some businesses, buy some real estate, maybe even open some businesses ourselves, all under one umbrella, I think that's the next thing. And I think it's really important, as entrepreneurs, shiny light syndrome is very tempting, right? It's like, ooh, shiny light, I'm going to go put my focus over here. Ooh, shiny light, no, this is the new cool thing over here. And instead, the shiny light to me is new, interesting things going on in the world, and how do I make them part of my businesses? I am obsessed with AI. It is keeping me up until 2, 3 in the morning and implementing systems and implementing agents into running things and automating things. And, I created an agent that just goes and finds catering events to tee up for our restaurants and this, or, all of these different things that I can do. And so I get my satisfaction and my shiny light from new, interesting things in the world. And how do I plug that into my existing business?
What platform are you using right now?
So Claude is the big one. I use OpenClaw. I have an entire closed system, literally like right in front of you. You can't see it, but there's a Mac Studio that, runs completely on itself. I communicate it, with it through Telegram. I literally text it and tell it what to do, and it moves the mouse and takes over things and goes and does all the research and updates spreadsheets and creates things. And, I'm still pretty early with it, but I think I'm more advanced than some. And, again, networking with really big nerds and people that are smarter than with me. I kind of have like a standing Friday beer lunch with a few people that are doing some of the craziest things you could ever imagine. And then I just, how do I implement some of those things? And when I'm talking with other people, help them implement some of those tools and things as well.
So are you familiar with Perplexity Computer? Not Perplexity, but Perplexity Computer.
Not the computer itself, no.
Okay. And we could nerd out on this. I've got in just like you. I start off. Chat comes out. You got the beta version. So Grok comes out. Let's have a look at that. Claude comes out. Claude Code. I'm heavy into Claude Code. It's doing everything. It's helped me build tools and all that kind of stuff. And this Perplexity Computer comes out. And I'd used Perplexity for a database, right? In terms of, okay, you can look up lots of great stuff for me. But this actually takes 19 separate platforms, including Claude Code, including ChatGPT, all the above, and puts them and localizes them and gives you the capability to build agents for each, so that you go, hey, I need this, 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 and this. It says, no problem. I'm going to go back in here. Let me grab that. Let me grab that agent from over here, ChatGPT from here, so on and so forth. We're going to put 3 or 4 on. We're going to put 2 on. We're going to put 7 on. And you can actually start assembling out a whole team for each. Claude Code does have that capability of building agents for each, but the ability to kind of go, hey, I recognize Gemini is far superior as it relates to visual aspects, right? And I see that from a research standpoint or a task standpoint, and the ability to purchase this computer, that's where you got to start, and then build it out. But you're able to take every platform you're already on and sign it in so that it actually picks up all history and so on and so forth. I'm surprised, since, as you said, you do it on a weekly basis, and I invite you to ask about it, maybe report back, is what people feel about it, because it's been like just astonishing for me.
Yeah, I'll have to look into a little bit, but the computer that I run, it is running everything locally. So my token usage is almost nothing. And then again, I have Claude subscription, Grok, Gemini, all the different ones, because you're right. They all have their different advantages for what they're going to do and what you use them for. And they also have their own different costs associated with them of whether it makes it worth it or not. And so but all of the agents for me are running locally on my computer here. And so I'm not paying token usage to have them go out there working and all that stuff. And every night it sends me a little report of how much it spent and this and everything. And but I already made a note of the Perplexity computer.
Yeah.
Take a look at that.
Will you be, or are you looking, you're saying you're up at 2:30, you're up at 3:30, you're, obviously addicted to the process like I am. Is there a tool coming out in the future that allows the franchise that you're specifically involved with to be better overall? Or are you focusing on your kind of purview of what's going on? Where's the kind of focus in that race against, I think it's a race against time, right? Because you have this idea.
Yeah. Well, my big end goal is I have a robot in the back of the stores where my teams can leave at 8:00 at night, and the robot cleans the whole store and preps everything and does everything. Because if you think about the number one thing that, at the end of a long day, and then maybe you get a huge rush 5 minutes before close, staying for that extra hour and scrubbing off some scraped blueberries that maybe got stomped on the floor or this or whatever it might be, that's the hardest part of the role that we hire for. And so, taking the tasks that people don't want to do and automating those. And I think I'm probably 5 years away from that, but in the meantime, what other tools can we add to solve problems? So the most recent one that I'm now helping roll out to other franchisees and other businesses that I'm part of is I created my own supply chain agents that actually monitor every invoice that are coming in across my 10 locations. They're paying attention to which prices we're paying, how much they're charging us for, delivery fees or gas fee, little fees that companies are starting to add in, and then pit them against each other. And the first run of these that I did, we had over $7,000 where our companies, where we have pre-negotiated and a master MSA, agreement of what they can charge us for certain items, in a 3-month period found over $7,000 that they mischarged us, added in fees they weren't supposed to, or are just overcharging us for other items that we could actually find from different vendors for cheaper. So my entire computing system was paid for in one night of creating this agent, having it scan the last 3 months of receipts and invoices. And now I've got it set up where all of those invoices automatically email to the agent. They're copied in. And so as the invoices come in every single day, they're finding these and then writing the emails to the person saying, on this invoice, this specific line item, quantity 14, we were supposed to be charged $23 and we're charged $38. Hey, boom, $8 times $14, there's $120 saved. It literally writes the emails. I just hit send.
That's pretty awesome. That's good. I like that. Yeah. Are they producing it every day for you? Like, in other words, end of day you're getting, or whenever you're getting that, and it's saying send, and it sends, and that's where you're getting it all in one file. How are you receiving that? Are you receiving those in emails, or are you receiving it in one file on your platform of Claude?
We're going to really nerd out and go down a little path here or whatever, but I've now created what I call Boardroom with my agent. So again, everything that I do is essentially like someone is working for me, and I text it, communicate with it, talk to it, and it then does the work itself on a closed system. So it's essentially an employee that has kind of a closed access to a number of things. There's certain rules that are put in place regarding whether it can send emails, respond to what it can read-only access on a lot of different things, has its own separate email address, its own separate phone number, et cetera, et cetera. But then what we do now is I do what I call Boardroom. And so every single day, first thing in the morning, 7 or 8 a.m., I just text it, all right, I'm ready for Boardroom. And essentially what that is I'm the board. And you are the CEOs of the different companies, and you come to me with up to 5 questions a day of things that you're stuck on or you need my help with, or you need to make a decision one way or the other, and I help continue to guide them. So rather than me having to tell the agents what to do every single step of the way, they're just coming to me with the 5 things that they're stuck on in one way, shape, or form. Now, the things like the summarizing the invoices or this or that or whatever, I'm only doing that maybe once a week of it telling me what it found over the last week. I also don't want to write an email on every single invoice all the time. So maybe it batches, a week's worth of emails into one that says, hey, in the last week, here's these invoices at these locations, and I can then just scan one email instead of having to scan 7 or 8 different ones. And, again, whether it's a catering finder, a marketing opportunity, a supply chain agent, I think I've got 17 or 18 different agents that are running. But the next thing that I'm really excited about is right now I'm starting to get the agents to talk to each other and really complete the loop itself, and ultimately take the information that they're learning about the businesses and opportunities and things like that and start to communicate with them to, help provide better solutions, and ultimately take some of those tasks that our team, maybe it's every single week you want to update your team with midweek. How are you doing with sales and labor and all of these kind of things? Well, what if I have an agent that can pull all of that information, put it into a summary email, then my leaders can get and read that information and then communicate that just with their teams rather than spending 2 hours going store by store, inputting numbers, figuring that out whatsoever. I just bought them each back 2 hours a week, giving them as good a data as you can possibly get and helping them understand the business. Going back to what you said before, how do we find the information as it's happening, not a month or 2 later when it's already too late?
The kind of off the cuff, but in the same vein, I've been pulled onto different platforms or different news stations talking about Sloan. I'm probably murdering it because I've said it so many different times. Obviously, that was the lettuce side of things. We're now talking, you're hearing about blueberries, obviously something that touches your industry. What, is there something we're doing preemptively? Is there something that, are you guys paying attention to the development there, or like, what are we doing?
I mean, honestly, I hadn't even heard about the blueberry thing yet. I just heard about the jalapeno thing.
Right.
But we are having active conversation. I have weekly meetings with our main suppliers of fruit, every week, talking about a number of different things, but that's definitely one of them, right? Where
is this coming from? Who's the supplier? What's the region? All that fun stuff.
Exactly.
Something you didn't think you probably had to pay attention to before, and now all of a sudden it's obviously newsworthy. So
no, I mean, and at a franchisor level, it's definitely something they're having some of those conversations with as well. I do also think that's an important reason for us not to go one-off buy things at different places, because, yes, sometimes we can buy strawberries from a local grocery store for 50 cents less or this or whatever. And some people do that. They run to Aldi's or wherever the cheapest place is every week in order to get those things. But using our proven supply chains with the MSAs that we have in place that and there are liabilities and all that kind of stuff and insurances that they have to have and this and everything to make sure that they're going through those and, definitely having the conversations and knowing that our franchisor is having those conversations as well. I made a post on social media. It was about a year ago when Salad and Go pulled all out of Texas and Oklahoma. And, now essentially, last week closed down and went full bankrupt of their remaining 70 locations. And I said, hey, I'm really glad I'm not in the salad industry. You look at Sweet Green right now is a $40 stock 18 months ago. I think it's $5.50 today. Yeah. And that's for a number of different reasons. But the lettuce was kind of the final nail in the coffin for a lot of people that are changing their eating patterns for that period of time. And if ultimately there becomes a slight red flag on a single item, you yank it completely off your menu. And fortunately, you have 11 other fruits that you can pick from for that time being, and it's not worth the risk. I just went out for sushi on Saturday night, and then Monday morning, I'm reading the jalapenos. Well, my spicy tuna crispy rice sure had a little slice of jalapeno on it. I'm sitting there thinking that in the back of my head, and ultimately, the Taco Bell admitted on the earnings call that they're expecting to have some softer sales because of some of that information and those hurdles are always going to happen. And in any industry, when I was in the cell phone industry, we weren't able to upgrade our towers fast enough. So Apple wouldn't sell us the iPhone when everybody else, and how do you navigate those different times and things? And we'll wait for the information to be there. I hate to say what decisions I'm going to make because I have to wait for the information to be there. Yeah. And then I'm just make the best decisions that I can. Did the same thing through COVID, did the same thing through a million ups and downs and a million other different businesses. And if every single day you get all the bits and pieces and make the best possible decision that you can, and then the next time you get all the bits and pieces and make the best decision that you can, in general, things work out pretty darn good.
Absolutely. Justin, it's amazing how much, and again, not to make this conversation about me, but how much our lives mirror each other and what our interests are. I was just noticing that when you said, hey, we'll probably, if we end up being buddies, there is so much in similarity. And obviously my producer's sitting back and he's just going, because I've already done some of these stories on the podcast, right? So I've already discussed them and he's just like, wow, you guys are so similar. One last question and then I'll let you go. You've invested a tremendous amount of time. You said a lot. I appreciate it. You're a great guest. It's a very serious question. Whose private jet is bigger, yours or Grant Cardone's?
No PJ for me. I want, just like the boats, I want to have friends with boats and jets. I don't want to have them myself. Happy to ride on them with you. But no, everything for me is investing back into the things that I'm building right now. And I'm happy to fly. I'm happy to fly commercial.
Same here. I notice you have Porsche in the back. Is that one of our passions? We do have for that. Is that
so I've got Legos. My son's super into Legos, and every once in a while buys some for me for Christmas here or there. But I do have actually when I exited my cell phone business about 7, 8, 9 years ago, whatever it was, bought a little Porsche Boxster S. Nothing fancy, but went and wrote a check for it, and nice. Still get to enjoy it every once in a while. Again, it's here in Iowa where I don't get to drive it 6 months a year, and then when you got 2 kids, there's only 2 seats, so that makes it even that much more difficult. But I do, it's fun to have those items, whether it's a watch or nothing crazy, but just things that you can enjoy and put the top down, go for a drive, clear your head, crank the music. And I definitely have a passion there. And I do want to go back to what you said. Like I would love to have more conversations with you, not on a podcast or whatnot, but get to, again, anyone that loves and nerds out on learning about businesses and has experience of, growing through interesting dynamics. I always find that those are some of the best lifelong relationships because we know what it's like and then have a natural respect for other people that are doing those kind of same things.
For sure.
And excited to hear your story more in the future as well.
And good news, next week my podcast is with a gentleman who builds robots for cleaning.
Okay.
So
all right.
That was
I will be listening to that episode. Just let him know you already have his first customer.
It sounds perfect. Justin, I appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Chief for growth, 88,000 deep, took the O, return the owner.